Next on the news.
In America, evil will not win, I promise you. Hate will not prevail.
President Biden in Buffalo with a message for the victims' families from this weekend's mass shooting. Also,
one of the things we react to is that level of hatred, any kind of hatred against people because of race, because of creed.
Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan calling for prayer in the wake of the supermarket attack. We'll also speak with him about the possible overturn of Roe v. Wade. And the federal government taking new steps to handle the shortage of baby formula that has parents worried. Plus, for the first time in more than 50 years, a House panel will hold a hearing on UFOs. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. President Biden and the First Lady remembering the victims from the Buffalo supermarket rampage. The Bidens met with community leaders, first responders, and families of those killed in Saturday's racially motivated attack. As Mike Valerio reports, the president condemned the shooting as terrorism motivated by a hateful and perverse ideology.
In America, evil will not win, I promise you. Hate will not prevail.
President Joe Biden mourned with the Buffalo community Tuesday, still reeling from Saturday's deadly attack. The president met with first responders and those whose loved ones were killed when a gunman opened fire in the Tops Friendly Market store, a place authorities say the self-proclaimed white supremacist suspect targeted because it served a predominantly black community.
The more information I hear, the more sad I begin to feel is that we could have done a better job. We could have averted this.
Social media posts by the suspect reveal he spent months allegedly planning the attack, even visiting the supermarket back in March to see the layout.
It seems that there were layers that missed these cues, that this individual was radicalized. He had this plan set up for 3-4 months, and this is the fallout of it.
Biden called the massacre domestic terrorism and condemned the hateful ideology that allegedly motivated the attack.
White supremacy is a poison. It's a poison, and it's been allowed to fester and grow right in front of our eyes. We need to say as clearly and forcefully as we can that the ideology of white supremacy has no place in America.
In Buffalo, Mike Valerio, Currents News.
New details are coming to light about the suspect in that supermarket rampage. Investigators say 18-year-old Peyton Gendron studied previous hate attacks and shootings. Police say Gendron wrote in social posts that he visited the supermarket several times before the attack, writing about how many white and black people were inside the store. Detectives say Gendron left after being questioned by a security guard about why he was there. We're also learning more about the victims. They include a church deacon, a woman who ran a food pantry, and a breast cancer survivor, all just going about their daily lives when they were gunned down. Families overcome with emotion.
We're not just hurting, we're angry, we're mad. This shouldn't have happened.
Trying to process the unexplainable killing of their loved ones gunned down at a Buffalo grocery store this weekend. Ruth Whitfield, the oldest of the victims, is the mother of Buffalo's former fire commissioner, killed shortly after visiting her husband of 68 years in a nursing home.
There's nothing to take away the pain, take away the hole in our hearts.
Former Police Lieutenant Aaron Salter worked security at the Top store in his retirement. His last heroic act, exchanging gunfire with the shooter and likely saving lives. Deacon Hayward Patterson was killed in the parking lot, never making it into the store, where his friends say he would often bring parishioners who needed to buy food.
It's too much for my heart.
Pearl Young, also a woman of faith, attended a prayer breakfast hours before the shooting.
For over 25 years, she was running a food pantry, giving and helping and being faithful to her church. She was a saint.
Catherine Massey, who at 72 years old was known as someone who stood up for equality. Friends say she worked to make a difference through her actions and her words. As a writer, she penned a letter to the editor about gun violence just last year. Margus Morrison died while buying snacks for his weekly movie night. Andre McNeil was picking up cupcakes for his grandson's birthday. Celestine Cheney, a breast cancer survivor who planned to belatedly celebrate Mother's Day with family this weekend, weekend. Roberta Drury, the youngest victim who died, dedicated her time to helping her brother fight leukemia. And Geraldine Talley was grocery shopping for a party with her fiancé, who survived.
She didn't get a chance to think, blink, nothing. This is just devastating. All the families that lost.
3 other victims are recovering from the attack. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops released a statement on the shooting. It says in part, the U.S. bishops join with others throughout the country in offering prayers for the support and healing of the families, friends, and communities of those impacted by these violent incidents. We pray especially for those who were injured and particularly for those who lost their lives. Later in this newscast, we speak with Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan about what Catholics can do in the wake of the shooting. We'll also speak with him about the possible overturn of Roe v. Wade. That's coming up. Investigators in California are now calling Sunday's deadly church shooting a politically motivated hate incident. The Orange County Sheriff says there was a grievance between the shooter, 68-year-old David Cho, and the Taiwanese community. The suspect, who's a Chinese-born U.S. citizen, is expected to appear in state court and is being held on $1 million bail. 1 man was killed and 5 others were injured in the shooting. The Secretary of Homeland Security made a stop at the U.S.-Mexico border Tuesday. Alejandro Mayorkas traveled to the Rio Grande Valley, visiting several locations Border Patrol agents say are popular crossing areas for migrants. The visit comes days before the Biden administration plans to end Title 42. That's a Trump-era COVID rule that allows border officials to quickly deport most migrants. Mayorkas' visit comes after authorities discovered a major drug smuggling tunnel on Mexico's border. The secret passage runs the length of a football field, spanning from Tijuana to a warehouse in San Diego. U.S. authorities say it's unknown how long the tunnel had been operating and what amount of drugs, if any, got through undetected. They say they also seized nearly 1,800 pounds of cocaine during the investigation. Several federal agencies and private companies are unveiling plans to address the baby formula shortage that's been plaguing parents. But some families could still be struggling to feed their babies for weeks. As Amy Kiley reports, critics say the Biden administration should have taken action months ago.
We're doing everything we can 24/7 to work on this.
These companies and government agencies say they're employing new strategies to ease the nation's baby formula shortage. The Justice Department has asked a court to approve a consent decree. It would reopen an Abbott formula plant with FDA supervision. February recalls and the closure of that Michigan facility are at the center of the crisis.
We're working closely with Abbott to get that plant that was shut down up and operating as soon as possible.
Abbott says it could resume operations there 2 weeks after getting the green light, but it'll take weeks more for supply to reach store shelves. The FDA says it's also relaxing restrictions on some baby formula imports.
That supply, so long as it's safe, will be able to make it into the U.S.
The White House says it's working with other domestic manufacturers to maximize output, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is offering emergency feeding recommendations. It says most babies older than 6 months can have up to 24 ounces of whole cow's milk a day, and those closer to a year can drink toddler formula for a few days. The Pentagon says it's trying to help military families.
The Defense Commissary Agency is working to ensure that all orders for overseas and remote stores receive baby formula shipments.
Critics say the Biden administration should have acted sooner. It says it did, but when pressed for details,
I don't have anything specific for you to point to.
I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
There's a lot more news headed your way. After weeks of intense fighting, Ukrainian troops are leaving their last stronghold in the besieged city of Mariupol. And he was a defender of the truth, a look at the miracle that helped a priest join the communion of saints. Plus, the truth is out there. Congress holds a public hearing on UFOs for the first time in 50 years.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
Two direct direct attacks on life. The big stories gripping the nation right now are weighing heavily on the minds of Catholics. The mass shooting at a Buffalo supermarket and the chaotic battle over abortion rights. Joining us now to talk about these significant events is the Bishop of Brooklyn, Robert Brennan. Welcome, Bishop.
It's good to be here. It's actually good to be in the studio itself.
It's so nice to have you here in person. Bishop, first let's begin with the rampage in Buffalo. Look, we're seeing shooting after shooting in this country. We're also seeing that we're getting away from the faith. Do you think there's a direct correlation between the two?
Well, we're seeing some extreme cases of violence. We certainly were fortunate here in Brooklyn, but we saw a case of that kind of violence here in our own neighborhood.
The subway.
But with the subway shooting, yes. But in Buffalo, I think we're troubled by that one. It's just horrific on so many levels. In this particular case, this was an individual who had extreme views on racism, on anti-Semitism, but it was just filled with hatred and I guess emotionally unstable. So this is troubling at every level. But one of the things we react to is that level of hatred, any kind of hatred against people because of race, because of creed. You know, we're all created in the image and likeness of God, and so that's a direct attack on God.
You know, speaking of racism, the U.S. bishops released a statement shortly after the shooting calling for an honest dialogue rooted in Christ in addressing the persistent evil of racism in our country. Now, the church has had conversations before, so what needs to come out of future discussions on racism?
It's always going to be an effort on our part because it's the actual dialogue itself that makes the difference. We need constantly to be listening to each other. We need to be able to understand how other people see events, you know, not just through our own eyes, but how other people experience events like this. So when the bishops talk about that dialogue, that's not going to stop.
Yeah.
Because that's something we need always to be engaged in.
And maybe more so, we need to do it more often.
That's right. That's right.
So in addition to prayer, you know, everybody says, you know, we're going to pray for the victims and pray for the communities and all that. What other actions can Catholics take in times like these?
In a world that's becoming increasingly more polarized, the temptation is to become more virulent in our own speech and in the way we react to one another. Again, emphasis, times like this, called, as you said, for profound prayer, but also for deep listening and understanding, and then for bold witness. But bold witness in a joyful way, a bold witness, personal holiness, and living that out, and going out of our way to show dignity and promote dignity and show respect. Those are things that spread. They have a contagious effect.
Now I want to talk a little bit about the topic of abortion. First, what was your reaction to the leaked Supreme Court document? It appears to show that the judges could vote to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Well, you know, it's hard to react to the leak. First of all, the leak itself was somewhat dishonorable, and it's being used as a pressure point. And it's encouraging to see that emerging vision respecting human life.
Right, and I know you took part in that day of prayer and fasting last week. Catholics praying that it will be overturned, praying that we can change the hearts and minds of people who are pro-abortion. But how do we change people's hearts?
Prayers have a value in themselves, but witness has another value. As a people of prayer, as a people who are giving joyful witness and trusting in the help of God, that's going to be transformative in the world.
And when we talk about changing hearts and minds, how do we do that? Where do we start?
You know, most people don't want to see abortion on demand through the entire 9 months of pregnancy. By far, people don't want that. But the way the atmosphere is right now, you can't even have that discussion. And so what will happen as a result if the case does go in that direction is it gives a chance for an honest debate and for some legitimate regulation. Obviously, we're looking for something deeper, but that comes through that conversion of heart and mind.
Well, oftentimes the pro-life movement is criticized for being pro-birth and not caring for the mother in need after the baby is born. But so how do we change that perception?
Most of those who give pro-life witness also do that hard work. So we have organizations here, such, for example, like Bridge to Life and the Life Center of Brooklyn, just to name a couple.
Yeah.
Those are pro-life organizations where people dedicate hours and all kinds of expertise to giving that kind of support. And you know, not everybody can do everything, but what I think we can work even harder on is providing that network.
Yeah.
So
spreading the word.
Spreading the word, but also being able to spot one another, to say, you know, we do this well, you do that well. Right. And so the more that we can build those bridges, the more we're able to help people in need. Rather than just duplicating everything all the time, we find ways to supplement.
Yeah, work together and coordinate.
Exactly.
All right, Bishop Robert Brennan, thank you so much for being here and for your insight on these two stories. You can watch Bishop Brennan's full interview on our website, currentsny.tv. Hundreds of Ukrainian fighters at that devastated steel plant in Mariupol are now in Russian hands. Russia called the operation on Tuesday a mass surrender. 240 fighters left the plant in what's seen as the end of the siege, which was a symbol of Ukraine's resistance. It's not clear what will happen to the fighters, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says work is continuing to bring them home. Meanwhile, hundreds of pilgrims joined together for a prayer of peace at the Vatican Monday night. Dozens of tiny lights illuminated St. Peter's Square as pilgrims walked side by side, praying the rosary for the world and specifically the war in Ukraine. A priest who knew about war and spoke out against hate is among the newest saints canonized by the Holy Father. St. Titus Brandsma was a Dutch theologian, journalist, and author who forcefully opposed and spoke out against the anti-Jewish laws passed by the Nazis. The saint's humanitarian efforts spreading around the world, even making their way to a Carmelite priest born in the Bronx. It was that priest who gave the saint the miracle needed to advance his cause of canonization. Kelsey Gussie reports.
St. Titus Brandsma was a Carmelite priest, journalist, and anti-Nazi champion from the Netherlands. During his life, Titus remained a fierce advocate for a free press and served as a liaison between the media and the Dutch bishops after the Third Reich invaded the Netherlands in 1940.
It fell to him to go to the different Catholic newspapers to tell them that they could not publish Nazi propaganda, and that if they published it, then they wouldn't be considered Catholic anymore.
As a result, Titus was arrested by the Gestapo and taken to various prisons before ultimately being killed by a lethal injection in the concentration camp at Dachau.
Sometimes it is difficult to find testimonies, but in the case of Father Titus, he has a reputation of sanctity from the start. His fellow prisoners, those who were with him, the survivors of Dachau, wrote a letter asking to begin his cause for beatification.
That reputation eventually spread to Father Michael Driscoll, the Carmelite friar from New York, who received the miracle that advanced Titus's cause for canonization. He had developed a devotion to Titus after learning about him in minor seminary from a Carmelite priest who knew the martyr personally, which made him a natural person to turn to after doctors told him he had advanced melanoma in his head.
All the oncologists said you had a very, very, very serious cancer. So that was put the fear and trembling into us when I got this cancer. And they said, well, people told me, pray to Father Titus for a cure. We need one miracle, and that's how it started.
After being operated on, Father Driscoll says doctors expected the cancer to return and to take his life along with it. But for years, the doctors kept waiting, and he kept praying. The healing was declared definitive, and eventually, the miracle that officially ushered Titus into the community of saints.
That was Kelsey Gussie reporting. Pope Francis named Titus Brandsma a patron saint of Catholic journalists. A group of young men will one day be praying for the help of all the saints in the Catholic Church. 12 seminarians have graduated from the Cathedral Seminary House of Formation in Douglaston, Queens, and they're getting closer to the priesthood.
This is the feast of victory for our God. Hallelujah.
The young men men from the Diocese of Brooklyn, the Diocese of Rockville Center, and the Archdiocese of New York celebrate Mass with Bishop Brennan as they officially finish their studies at the minor seminary. They will then move on to the major seminary, where hopefully in about 4 years they'll become priests. 5 of those 12 men will be ministering to the Diocese of Brooklyn, so we will pray for them as they continue their vocational journey. Still to come on Currents News, it's something that hasn't happened in more than a half a century. A congressional hearing focusing on strange flying objects in the sky. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Finally, a story that's out of this world. For the first time in more than half a century, a House panel is holding a highly anticipated public hearing on UFOs. But as Kristen Fisher reports, several government officials say they're less worried about aliens and more concerned about foreign adversaries.
7 years after Navy pilots spotted this unexplained object off the Atlantic coast,
There's a thing. It's rotating.
top Pentagon officials will be grilled by members of a House Intelligence Subcommittee, the first public hearing on UFOs or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, in more than half a century.
For far too long, this issue wasn't even taken very seriously. It was essentially relegated to science fiction. But in a very real sense, UAPs present a very real national security risk, and the Intelligence Committee has a responsibility to investigate.
The hearing comes almost a year after the Director of National Intelligence released a highly anticipated report which examined 144 reports of UAPs, but identified only a single one, which turned out to be a deflated balloon. Quote, the others remain unexplained.
My gosh!
UFOs first hit the American public's radar about 70 years ago, pushing Pentagon officials to try to explain the unexplainable.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers.
In the 1960s, then Congressman Gerald Ford asked Congress to investigate, leading to the last public hearings on UFOs. But the Air Force investigation known as Project Blue Book concluded that UFOs were not extraterrestrial, nor did they pose a threat to our national security. Whatever they are, the intelligence report concedes a handful of UAPs appear to demonstrate advanced technology, some without discernible means of propulsion.
The speeds that they're exhibiting, as well as the flight characteristics, there's no platform or really energy source that I'm aware of that could allow something to stay in the air as long as these objects were.
The only thing certain is that they exist.
The big question is, whose is it, and where is it from, and what are the intentions, and what are the full capabilities, and is there something we can learn from it?
That was Kristen Fisher reporting. According to naval intelligence officers, the number of reported unidentified aerial phenomena sightings have grown to approximately 400 since last year's report, and they often occur in military training areas or other federal airspaces. So interesting. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.